Good afternoon and salam alaikum to those out there in the audience. This is Professor Amina Al-Din with Critical Talk, which is a production of Muslim Network TV. Today we have a very important and yet sensitive topic talking about the fabric that women use to cover their head, alternatively called a kimar or a hijab. Some way or the other, I kind of think those terms have become weaponized, but that's a different issue. And I'm going to cut down on my jibber jabber because everybody knows in the Muslim community the issue. Uh, I have with me today to discuss this issue some fabulous people who have taken this seriously and enough to produce an animation, which we will give you a link to. I have Dr. Manal Hamzeh, um, who is a full professor of gender and sexuality studies at New Mexico State University. Her teaching and research draw on anti-racist educational theories and decolonial feminist research methodologies. I will be learning a lot from her in the future. Manal is the sole author of Women Resisting Sexual Violence and the Egyptian Revolution, Arab Feminism Testimonies. Please get this book because I am buying it today. Pedagogies of Deveiling. She wrote in 2012. I'm also buying that today. And co author of the short animation film, which we'll watch a piece of today, The Four Hijab, which she originally produced in 2016, but I got a hold of it and her now. It's a collaborative work with playwright Jamil Khoury of Chicago's Silk Road Rising Theater. And I advise everybody in the audience keep up with Silk Road Rising. Jamil Khoury is the founding artistic director of Silk Road Rising, an art making and art service organization, which really serves all of us, that shapes conversation about Asian, Middle Eastern, and Muslim Americans. A theater producer, playwright, essayist, and filmmaker. Corey's work focuses on Middle Eastern themes and others, and questions of diaspora. Corey and his husband, Malik Jelani, who we've also had on the program, created Silk Road Rising as a response to the attacks of September 11th, way back in 2001. They are here, guys, now virtual, before we can go to the place. They use storytelling to counter racism and xenophobia and to expand the representation of Silk Road peoples. We also have with us Debra Majeed, who is a professor emeritus of religious studies at Beloit College, and she's a religious historian who makes the interconnection between religion, gender, and justice central to her work. She is the first African American female and first Muslim to be tenured in a, check this out, 174-year history of Beloit College and the first to be awarded emeritus status. Her contributions to social justice on the campus and in the wider community during her 21 years of teaching led the city of Beloit to proclaim January 21st, 2011, Dr. Debra Majeed Day. With the publication of her groundbreaking work on polygyny, what it means when African American Muslim women share their husbands, you got to get this book too, in 2015. Dr. Majeed continues to work with mosque communities for the cultivation of resources and support for healthy marriages. What can I say? I am so honored. Smile, y'all. Even Jamil. Um, Jamil, let me start with you. What made you want to do this?
Well, Manal Hamzeh.
There you
You know,
go.
we Manal and I have a long history as friends, and a conversation that's been going on for decades, and certainly questions of feminism and religion and gender justice and patriarchal culture have been very, very much a center of our world together. And so Manal bringing her work to us allowed us to think of it dramatically, and wanting to take it to this place sort of outside of the academy and outside of more academic language, and adapt it to this very accessible art form. I do want to establish, I love the book that Manal wrote that we adapted this from, Pedagogies of Deveiling, and it's very inspiring, and I think very courageous on any number of levels. So, the idea was to take something that's very rich in theory, and also, that was part of Manal's ongoing research, and bring it to audiences in ways where they could draw their own connections and parallels to their own respective faith traditions and lives.
Well, this animation, I fell out laughing. I started sending it out immediately. Manal, girl, tell us what you're doing and where talk to us about yourself and Fatima Manisi and this veil thing, because you all really could have kept your idiosyncrasies about a darn veil over there in Egypt and other places and left us Black women alone. But, okay.
All right. I have to say that I came to the North American Academy a bit late, or maybe the right time in my life. So I was not as intimidated by the Western imposed epistemologies. So I went on a journey to figure out my Muslimness and my Arabness coming after 9/11 to the US. That took me, of course, to Fatima Marnisi.
Yeah.
And her work, I wanted to take and quote unquote translate into to assert it as an epistemology, as an Arab Muslim feminist epistemology in the North academic context. So I took her work on the veil and beyond the veil to theorize the study of my dissertation with young Muslim women here on the southwest borders of the US. And this book came out of this dissertation study, and then the animation film. The animation film also took me to also assert the necessity and urgency of doing research-based art methodologies rather than, again, traditional Western methodologies that speak at people, pretend to be objective and neutral. So this kind of methodology is more of collaborative and people-centered, that is meant to disseminate and share created knowledge with the biggest and largest audience in the world, given that the Four Hijabs now is in Arabic and in English, both.
Right. We have also with us the fabulous Dr. Majeed, who is a leading feminist and womanist scholar from the Muslim community and in other communities, who write widely on a number of subjects, and she just presented a paper based on this, which is fabulous, that I will make sure both of you get. But Dr. Debra, tell us about this paper.
Well, I first want to say thank you for the invitation, and it's great to meet Manal and Jamil, and I do have the book. Okay.
That's not fair.
Well, what can I say? So I was intrigued by the notion that here we have a form of activism that is trying to do what religious women all over the place are interested in, and that is exegetical approaches to scriptural interpretation.
Sure.
So the idea that here we have a highlight of 12 ayah of verses in the Quran that are narrowly defined to speak of a single term in a very narrow way, and yet encourage, compel some folks to have a wider rereading of text as a way of, as a form of empowerment was really intriguing to me.
Okay, well, I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna get in all the stuff I want to get in, but I'm gonna ask somebody has something additional on because we're getting an echo. I don't know if it's a radio, if it's something, but I'm gonna ask my producer to not keep my audience waiting as he puts on the animation.
Amina, while they're doing that, do you want to give an introduction to that spot where we're going to be coming into?
Yeah, let me do that.
Oh, here they come.
Four Hijabs. Yes, folks, it's over. All four hijabs are together at last.
Sing
About
it, sister. Togetherness.
I've convened this here gathering because we four hijabs have been kept apart far too long and because it was the right thing to do. My fellow hijabs, we have suffered and we have been wrongly accused of making others suffer. Am I right or am I wrong?
So right. 200%.
We've been misrepresented, distorted, contradicted, taken out of context, and we have been co-opted by patriarchal politics.
Patriarchy.
So, we're here to reclaim our Quranic verses, clarify our layered meanings, and speak for ourselves.
Yeah.
Hey,
Preach.
Introductions first, shall we? Let's start with you, Spatial.
I am the spatial hijab. I am the divider between private and public spaces.
That's lovely. Visual.
Oh my god, my turn? Okay. Wow. I am the visual hijab. I am the modest dress that is prescribed for Muslim women and men.
Very good. I am the ethical hijab, and I am the gateway to piety and to modest behavior.
Last and historically least, I am the spiritual hijab. I'm the barrier block spiritual and intellectual advancement. I must be overcome.
Oh, gee, you're like so complex. I really envy that.
I envy your simplicity.
Envy is not so becoming of us.
Hello, spatial here, first one called, remember?
Please proceed.
I'm mentioned in the Quran only twice. I'm the curtain that separated the prophet's bedroom from those overstaying guests on his wedding night. And I'm also the curtain that protected Mary's privacy as she gave birth to Jesus. In other words, I divide that which is private from that which is public in the lives of Muslims.
Wait, there's nothing confining or inhibiting about that.
Your next visual.
I'm ready for my close-up. Be sure to get my good side. I'm just kidding. Every side's my good side. Okay, some say I'm overexposed, that I'm everywhere you turn. Others say I'm shallow and superficial, but honestly, I am so much more than just like spatial, I'm mentioned only twice in the Quran. I cover the bodies of Muslim men and women who express modesty through their dress.
That's men and women equally, without double standards.
But here's the kicker. You three get to operate literally, figuratively, and metaphorically. I'm just a scrap of cloth.
Yeah, but you're universal. Hindus, Jews, and Christians are also taught to dress modestly. That's really cool.
Plus, you get to have different appearances and different meanings in different places at different times. Now that's power.
Actually, they all show up in every world religion throughout history.
Right, I attract a lot of attention. Most of it's still negative. Even when I look stunning.
Check the ego, please. Okay, time to move along. I'll go. I'm the ethical hijab. I'm referred to in 2 Quranic verses, for which I'm humbly grateful. I directed the Prophet's wives and his male and female kin to be reserved and to be more pious, especially as Islam's emerging message was facing great resistance.
Those were painful times for Muslims.
I'm amazed you can stay so diplomatic, ethical. Where's your anger?
I try and model the best behavior that I can. I'm the ethical threshold. I call upon Muslim women and men to inspire others through the behavior.
Ooh, I'm the fashion model, and you're the role model.
You ever notice how only you laugh at your jokes?
Okay, spatial. Now, spiritual. You have 10 verses. We each only have 2.
We can't compete with that.
But I still feel erased. No one's ever heard of me.
You may want to lose the self-pity.
I'm the one who inhibits consciousness. I impair vision. I deafen ears. I numb minds. I prevent Muslims from overcoming ignorance and illiteracy. Ignorance is not bliss. With critical inquiry and deeper knowledge, Muslims can transcend me.
Oh my God, spiritual hijab exists to be eclipsed.
Absolutely. For Muslims to resist oppression and to thrive, they have to open their minds.
The verses are available for all Muslims to read without mediation.
10 verses or not, I've been ignored.
Because you're scary.
I'm not scary.
You're complicated.
Learning is scary. Questioning is scary. Challenging deeply held beliefs is scary.
I feel so ashamed, so humiliated. Like I've been turned into false dogma, a fixed symbol of female Muslimness. I don't exist to restrain women's bodies.
We're experiencing some real breakthroughs here.
I would never prevent women from participating fully in public life. I don't imprison women in their homes. That's creepy.
When Muslim women embody me as a headscarf or a long cloak, all of a sudden I'm controlling women's bodies, and that's not me.
Public space belongs as much to women as to men. I'm not a barrier to full access or freedom of movement. I'd despise myself if that's what I was.
They lied to me when they told me the basketball court was only for boys.
The basketball court belongs to everyone.
Oh, and then I get appropriated by Western and Muslim politicians to wage wars, and neither of them care about women. They care about power.
So, the imperialists and the Islamists are two sides of the same coin.
Women's bodies become their battlefield. The imperialists want women uncovered. The Islamists want women covered.
Women are but a pretext for justifying domination. They use women to advance their own interests. They don't care what women want.
They said I couldn't swim because boys would see me in a bathing suit.
And I'm not here to police Muslim women or men in public or private spaces. The individual Muslim determines how to express modest behavior, not me.
How did I become the suppressor of knowledge, free art, and critical thinking? I'm not the enforcer of ignorance or backwardness. I'm the obstacle that Muslims must overcome, using their free will. New knowledge and spiritual depth await Muslims who see beyond me.
So there's not one right interpretation?
There can never be. You have to interpret our verses and understand them for yourselves. That is something anyone and everyone can do.
Well, so many concepts. Let me ask you a question. How did 3 yards, 2.5 yards of material become such an issue? Anybody? It's a laid back conversation. Get your coffee and dig in.
Well, we do know that veiling as sorts predates the arrival of the prophet. And we also know that in the Western world, we have become obsessed with what Muslim women wear, how they cover in whatever form of hijab. And too often we have seen it in the West as a system of or a symbol of oppression. So we know that is true for some Muslim women, but as who was it? Amina Wadu talks about the hijab of oppression and the hijab of liberation look the same. The hijab of deception and the hijab of integrity look the same. So if we want to talk about the visibility of a piece of cloth, whether it's on your head, your shoulders, the rest of your body, it has special meaning to the Muslim woman who wears it, depending on the context, but it also has meaning to women who don't wear it, depending upon their context.
Manal?
I think I caught what you were asking, but I'm not quite sure. But let me take a try. I keep, because I use Arabic to unpack the meaning of the word and how it is present in the 16 verses, the word hijab is not the word used for the two verses that are relevant to the clothing of men and women. So I think the word hijab has been co-opted.
It has.
Right? It's been co-opted and used as the symbol of oppression or control of women, Muslim women. I want to focus more in this conversation about the hijab that is reiterated as hijab in the 10 verses about the spirituality.
Right.
And that is the cover that is separating Muslim minds from deeper knowledge and knowing God, Allah. So I try my best when I'm conversing, whether formally or informally, not to use the normative word hijab, whether in the context of North America or other Muslim majority context, because as I use it, it's going to reinforce the phobia, the misconceptions, the real negative representation of Muslim women and Muslims altogether.
Now go back a little bit, and for our audience, tell us the words that are actually being used.
In the two verses, one is addressing men and the other one is addressing women, and mostly we think from the context it's addressing the wives and the family of and the word is not hijab, it's jalabibihinna. So it is about their cloak, it's about their regular dress at that time. It could have been using the word blouse or jacket at this time. So I don't know when the word hijab as a dress creeped into our lexicon and into our language. I am just probably 100+ years ago when the British came forcefully and colonized the Arab Muslim region, they started to use this word. It wasn't used before.
Yeah.
So we're responsible not to circulate the negative representing concepts and sway people's attention to the use of the actual words in the Quran that represent modesty and dress of Muslims altogether, all genders, not women.
I think that we're going to take a break. I'm going to try to straighten out some of these audio technical problems. And when we come back, Bill, I want to know how this has enlightened you and how you built around it. We're going to take a break. This is Professor Manal Hamzeh with Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk. And I have some fabulous guests. Get out your pencils and papers. We're going to school, kids.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me! No justice! No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned have brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
This is Professor Manal Hamzeh with Critical Talk on Muslim Network TV. And we are discussing the Four Hijabs which is a problem in and of itself, and we've traced where we think it may have come into the everyday lexicon. It certainly is not in the Quran as other than a screen or protection or a curtain. I have found it so difficult, even in my teaching, um, to distinguish for students here in the US who are reading English. And unfortunately, Yusuf Ali and some other translations, and they can't get to the Arabic. You know, I can write on the board and tell them what this word means and how to locate the word and how it's going to change forms in a particular sentence, and which goes, oops. But Jamil, who coddled all of these ideas wonderfully into a screenplay with those really weird characters. I mean, I saw the characters and I was saying, why did he choose this? And then I thought about it and I said, well, why not? He couldn't have chose anything else. So talk to us.
Well, first of all, I wish I could take all that credit. Obviously, you know, once again, had a wonderful collaborator in Manal and an entire creative team, a director and animator, and wonderful group of actors, and a fairly robust workshopping process. So a script development process that was several stages. And, you know, we were trying, Manal and I were really trying to honor the source material and, you know, the sort of the theoretical ideas that move this conversation, and also in many ways to decenter the to veil or not to veil discourse that is so prevalent. You know, I want to say both in Muslim and non-Muslim circles, and the very kind of reductionist approach that so many people take to conversation of the veil. Most instructive for me is this idea that we're not so much talking about a piece of cloth as we are talking about an ethical and spiritual system. So that was where I really learned and where I really benefited from, you know, the conversations and the sort of discovery and uncovering that occurred within this process, that we're talking about, you know, a set of assumptions that have been manipulated in certain ways for very specific outcomes, social outcomes, political outcomes, and so forth. And so, you know, the critique of the spiritual hijab and the idea that 10 of the 16 verses are really centered on this idea of that which obstructs learning, that which obstructs the acquisition of knowledge. And of course, you know, knowledge is power, right? And the sort of liberatory aspects of learning. And that it is incumbent upon Muslims to overcome that. That, for me, really attests to the beauty of this, let's say, deconstructive process or, you know, reclamation. And also it shifts, once again, the center of the conversation. I think it's a very radical piece, and I'm not saying that in like some self-congratulatory way. I think what Manal has really hit on is something that is, you know, a very direct conversation with the Muslim community and with non-Muslim communities about these questions of modesty and control of the body and control of sort of regulation of sexuality and appearance that really play out as oppression, as opposed to any kind of liberatory politic.
Unmuted. I would agree. I would agree specifically because I think what the film does is try to get us off the visual of hijab and onto a discussion of what does it mean to be someone who understands the importance of interpretation. What does it mean actually to know that one can interpret or reread the Quran for themselves without having the imposition of a particular narrative, of a particular way of knowing, that context and time and age and other identities that influence all of our readings of life itself also influence our readings of the Quran, and in doing so, that can give us an expanded understanding where we take the richness of all of these passages that have been limited to a particular concept and see that there is something that can be that is accessible to everybody today. There's a richness there. There is an encouragement there. There's an empowerment there for people to read the Quran for themselves. So it's a reintroduction to the revelation of God and how that really can apply to one's life.
Right. That's a good way of putting it, Dr. Majeed. I appreciate that. It's the rereading or interpreting the text, the Quranic text, from one's positionality, one's context within history is something necessary to be equipped with at this point. So it is not forbidden for us as Muslims to reread the text. It is not left to what is called experts. We live our Muslimness in our own ways, sometimes without even pulling specific verses from the Quran and say we're applying those verses in our lives and in our Muslimness. So in this sense, I think we're repopularizing the text in so many ways. And that is what I think, what I call pedagogies of deveiling, is the process of continuous unpacking one layer after the other, one veil after the other, to get to the meanings, not one meaning, but several meanings that are applicable to one's context.
I think what you're both mentioning is both. No, let me go back. I really want the two of you to talk about interpretation. We're sitting in the United States where we have people translating, well, they're not here, but translated Qurans. And those Qurans are translated from the position of the person doing the translating.
Yes.
Sometimes to serve an overlord, so all the Muslims don't die. Other times because of their own limited, sometimes, understanding. I ran across only one Quran where the translation was by a woman, and I'm not remembering her name. I do have the Quran, but one of the things that happened quickly was oh no, you can't read this. No, not that one. It's with the Arabic in it, not Lale. It's with the Arabic in it, and I will. It's in my prayer room. But quickly the book was removed. You couldn't buy it. And I'm saying interesting, because when you read through it, she's almost giving a male interpretation, and then there are points where she diverges. But I want the two of you to break down how one takes the theoretical and makes it pragmatic, what you're actually talking about interpretation, so that people don't get crazy. And I get 9,000 emails, which I'm not going to answer anyway. But, I think that that's important because people are scared to read the Quran for themselves. So the two of you, and Jamil, you and I will listen for a moment. Talk about it. I got two brilliant professors here. I'm putting y'all to work.
Your mic, Dr. Majeed. Her mic is off. Yes. Uh-oh.
You go first, Manal.
Okay. Well, first, I don't teach the Quran, so I'm going to speak from the position of an Arab Muslim feminist that teaches text, any kind of text. I suggest tools to be used to read text. And one of them, as an Arab feminist, is to contextualize the text. You can't read text out of context. One. The other one is we need to read the authors of the texts, whether they are in the case that you're presenting, Dr. Aldeen, about translating the Quran or interpreting the Quran. We need to investigate the author's positionalities. That means, what is their agenda? Where did they live? What did they intend in their lives? What did they want out of this interpretation? We have to investigate that to be able to figure out the meaning that they are offering. And I'm not saying it is wrong or right. We need to just to be able to reread the text from with those two tools, the contextualization, which is also means historicization, and the positionalities of the authors. Often interpreters of the Quran in more than 1,000 years ago, we don't know much about them the way we read people's positionalities at this age. So we could be making assumptions, but what their interpretations have done give us an idea about what they intended to do with them. So, for example, if some texts were continuously and interpreted to mean to be understood as a text from Allah to control women's bodies, we need to question that, because we are equal in the eye of Allah in Islam. There's no hierarchy between genders. So I, again, to repeat, I offer the two tools: contextualization, historicization, and checking the positionality and the agenda of authors or interpreters.
And what I hear you saying is that, number one, if in reading the Quran we see no justice, can that really be the word of God?
Thank you.
Number one. And number two, when you talk about context, for me, you're saying, let's go back to the purpose of revelation of this particular passage. Let's figure out what was going on in Medina or in Mecca at the time. Who was speaking? Is this passage, as you've mentioned with a couple of the passages of the 12, is this passage directed to the prophet only?
Yes.
Directed to the prophet's wives only? Yes. And these passages over the centuries have been used to be implied for all women. Yes. What I appreciate most about what this film is trying to do is akin to the Arabic class I'm taking down, where we are compelled to use an Arabic dictionary. And when you go to the Arabic dictionary and you're looking up a word, you may see dozens of meanings for a particular word. So the question is, why did the interpreters, and by interpreters, we know that all the translations themselves are interpretations themselves, right? Wow. So what led a particular interpreter to pick this word as opposed to that word, right? Yes. And how did that interpreter's own positionality, own gender, own class, own race, own time, how did that inform how typically he was interpreting a particular passage? But we come back to the realization of justice. So if we're reading a passage and it implies that Allah sustains the oppression or domination of women, then we know, at least in my view, that that is un-Islamic, because that's not something that Allah does.
Exactly. Thank you. That's great. And you have highlighted the tool of looking at asbab and nuzul, the reasons for the revelation. So this is also important. That's really, people don't understand that or are not directed to look at that context too. Yes. Yeah, great.
Let me ask Jamil. Let me mute Manal and Debra and ask Jamil, What did you just get out of that conversation? I am so inspired. And Women's History Month is coming up, and you know I'm going to get all of y'all back again several times.
Well, I have sometimes sort of tongue in cheek referred to, and I come from a Christian, an Eastern Christian background. I've referred to Manal as a Protestant Muslim because part of Protestant discourse around Reformation had to do with owning the text in a certain way and, essentially reorienting one's personal relationship to text. So, I think on the one hand, it should be a given that all of us can interpret a piece of text, that we have, that God gave us the brain to engage with meaning and with subtext and so forth. But because we have a history in many traditions of that being discouraged, I think this is a statement of courage that we just heard from our two esteemed professors, that, the insistence on sort of taking back and the insistence on saying, I will ascribe my own interpretive talents and abilities. I will bring, my base of knowledge to this text, to this word, to this sentence, and derive something that, to Dr. Majeed's point, brings us to a place of justice and brings us to a place of wielding power constructively, and not about hurting people, not about disempowering people. I want to say this is learning for all faith traditions. I want to say this is not confined to Islam. This is something that all of us have to be mindful of and once again sort of reclaim. I also want to say that this is a great case for Muslim pluralism, and I don't think there is enough conversation in certainly mainstream representation of Muslims and Muslimness around the question of Muslim pluralism. And I've always thought that this project is advancing a more pluralistic engagement with the text.
Well, we only have a few minutes left, and I want you to take a moment while we take a break and think about, we've opened the dialogue. We have Women's History Month coming up. I want to know what you think are the salient points where we must start to reinterpret, to take back. What would women's liberation that the Quran gives look like? This is Professor Manal Hamzeh, Critical Talk, a production of Muslim Network TV, and we will be right back.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's world because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's world because it makes me happy. What? No. 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 And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is very smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
This is Professor Manal Dean with Critical Talk, a production of Muslim Network TV, and I have the wondrous honor of having Dr. Manal Hamzeh. I'm sorry, I keep messing that up. Hamzeh and Jamil Khoury and Dr. Debra Majeed with me, and we're using one instance, all of this talk about hijab, to talk about reinterpretation. And we have two things to look at: the context of the author, right? And historicizing them, give them a place in history, find out where they're writing from, right? And then Debra Majeed talked about getting, I use the Dictionary of the Holy Quran, which really, and it gives me the references right there as to where it's used, how many times it's used, and in which form. Handy tools, and I use a concordance. But I think that we've opened something that we must continue. Most of you saw the question that was on the screen and kind of answered it. Why is there often so much controversy around reinterpreting a religious text? Well, Protestants, Orthodox Christians, and Catholics, I mean, if they'd have had a stake, they'd have burned the woman at it. I'm trying to think of the woman's name. Was her name Mary Douglas? I don't remember her name exactly. But as soon as women started reinterpreting, men went crazy. And some women went crazy. It's a hard job because people are scared. They're scared they're going to go to hell, even though the text they're reading was written by another human being, right? Who's not God. You know, they're, oh my God, I can't do this. In our last few moments, would each of you give us some directives? Because we're going to blow out Women's History Month. Go ahead.
Well, I'll start this time. I think it's very important for us to start at a point of education, but education that is about a system of uneducating something. And by that, I mean, we have put our specific authorities, we have given them a sacredness as if the norms that they ascribe to and we have ascribed to as a result are the only norms possible. So we have to begin a process of re-education so that women and men and everyone could understand that this is possible, that it is possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to speak directly through you, through the text. You are a survivor of rape. You are a survivor of homelessness. You're a survivor of income equality. Do you know that you did not go to college? You did not go to some imam's class, but that Allah can speak directly through your own experience. So we would be lifting up experience as a point of authority. So I would start out with re-educating and giving a more significance to our own experience as authority as we engage the text.
I can build on that, of course, Dr. Majeed. The work I do in my classrooms and outside the classroom is about unlearning. And that's a process that is very, very difficult because it begins with facing fears that have been put in learners' hearts and minds of what would happen if they divert from normativity and the taken for granted, and if they seriously start to question the taken for granted. So that's the pedagogy of deveiling, which starts with unlearning and becoming fearless. And becoming fearless is a process. It's not somebody who is a hero or a shiro who are brave. It's a process of figuring out how to expose those powers that are controlling our minds and our bodies through traditional schooling rather than education and learning. So this is something that needs to be done and we need to be aware of in our schools, universities, and most importantly, and I think the most creative and inspiring media is art. And that's why I think this animation film has more, it's more accessible and it has a wider reach than an academic book that I've written on this issue.
And, one of the things that every time I watch the Four Hijabs that I'm really struck about is, I believe that good art poses questions, that we don't necessarily provide answers. And it's not about hitting someone over the head or saying and I want to say that we succeed in this project with posing numerous questions that create a point of entry for further inquiry, further research, further discovery, further interpretation. And I'm hugely proud of that. And I think that is something that really speaks to the integrity of the project. And once again, that came out of a very expansive, collaborative, many people, all hands on deck kind of approach. The ability to take language and to own it in a way that speaks to our lives, that speaks to our experiences, much the way that we develop theory, I think is absolutely critical if we are to have a relationship to a faith tradition that is deeply satisfying. And that is, once again, I know I keep using this word, but just deeply liberatory. And because language has been used so long to hold people down or to hold people back or to blind people, I think that, that right and taking that right, not asking for it, not begging for it, not negotiating for it, but taking it is absolutely critical to the health of our communities and, our health as believers, however we may define that, and as adherents to a tradition or traditions, however we may define that.
Well, let me say that I don't say anything else. So this is Professor Manal Hamzeh on Critical Talk, a production of Muslim Network TV. You will hear from all of us throughout Women's History Month. And I think Jamil provides a space for men to enter the conversation without being labeled in all those fancy words. I thank all of you for giving your time. I will be on your email and in your ear until you get tired and say, Amal, shut up. Thank you again and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.